Galactic troopers mocked the human warrior until his battlefield record was revealed. The transport doors opened and the cold hit first. Not the temperature. The silence. 43 alien troopers in the processing bay of Forward Base Kether 9 stopped what they were doing and looked at the human stepping off the Coalition shuttle with one bag, one rifle, and nothing on his face that could be read as welcome. Sergeant Eli Cross. Human. Unaugmented. The 1st Infantry Attachment in the Galactic Coalition's Joint Combat Program. He was 5 feet 11 inches. 190 pounds of baseline biology. No exoskeleton. No carbon fiber plating. No redundant cardiac chambers. No secondary respiratory system. He stood in the doorway of the most advanced military installation in 6-star systems and looked around the room the way a man looks at a job site he has been assigned without being consulted, cataloging exits, noting structural weight distribution, calculating which direction the trouble would arrive from. It was going to come from the large one. The Vorkai sergeant near the processing console was 7 feet of reinforced muscle and quiet certainty. 3 planetary campaigns on the patch above his left shoulder. His name was Zethkai and he was looking at Eli the way experienced people look at things they have already categorized. Coalition Human Attachment, Zethkai said. He read it from the manifest the way Eli's grandfather used to read the weather, like a statement about what was going to happen, not what he hoped for. Unaugmented. The word landed in the bay and nobody argued with it. Eli followed the base aide into the corridor. The base was built for creatures larger and heavier than him. Handles at chest height. Ceiling lights calibrated for visual spectrums that left the edges of his vision looking pale and washed out. He walked through all of it without comment, counting turns, building the layout in the part of his mind that ran its own parallel program regardless of what else was happening. His bunk was at the end of the quarters bay. Next to the waste cycle processor, which ran on a 6-hour rotation with a sound like gravel in a metal drum. He put his bag on the mattress. Sat down. Looked at the ceiling. Well, all right then. Squad orientation was the next morning. 11 troopers stood in formation, Vorkai, Dreth, Quorith, and one human at the end of the line who was 4 inches shorter than the next shortest trooper in the room. Zethkai ran the meeting with the practiced efficiency of someone who had already decided the outcome. The introductions went in order. Campaign tallies. Augmentation classes. Confirmed engagement numbers. The Vorkai slammed their chest plates when they spoke, a sound like impact. The 2 Dreth troopers, Voss and Kerr, produced a harmonic undertone that vibrated the comm implant behind Eli's left ear. The Quorith female, Scylla, gave her name and record in 4 words and resumed staring at Eli. When his turn came, he said, Sergeant Eli Cross. Infantry. I've been in a few scrapes. He stopped there. The room waited. He did not add anything. Zethkai looked at him for 3 seconds and moved on. In the corridor after orientation, Voss said the word. In Dreth trade dialect. The comm implant translated it without delay. Soft meat. The tone was amused. Not hostile. A conclusion, not an insult. Eli kept walking. He found the canteen, sat in the far corner with his back to the wall and his eyes on the 2 entrances, and ate his ration food in silence. Not a choice, that corner. A habit with 11 years of weight behind it. His friend Owen had called it out once, on a station called Meridian Point, over a meal that was better than base rations but not by much. You sit like someone is always about to shoot you, Owen had said. Someone usually is, Eli had said. Owen had laughed. He had a laugh that came from somewhere genuine, which was rarer than it should have been. Eli ate his food and did not think about Owen. He thought about Zethkai, across the canteen, watching him with the careful attention of a man solving an equation that keeps returning the wrong answer. The equation was not complicated. Unaugmented human. Slower reaction time. Less structural durability. No redundant systems. A body built for a specific planet deployed 60,000 light-years from it. Zethkai had the equation. Eli had 11 years of what the equation did not measure. He finished eating, disposed of the tray, and walked back to his bunk. He took the photograph from his breast pocket and set it against the bunk frame. 6 people standing on a ridge, squinting into a wind that did not photograph. Owen was second from the left. A woman named Lena was at the far end, her helmet pushed back the way she always wore it regardless of protocol. For others with names he knew without having to look. He put it back in his pocket. Stared at the ceiling. The waste cycle processor ran at 2 in the morning and vibrated the wall beside his head with the indifference of a machine that had no concept of anyone trying to sleep. He slept through it. Equipment review was the following afternoon. PRYN, the coalition intelligence officer embedded with the joint program, worked her datapad with the focused precision of someone who believed the details were where everything important lived. She reached Eli's station and paused. His rifle had no targeting assist. No range-finding augment. A scope that was technically functional and practically dependent on the person behind it understanding every variable between the barrel and the target. Effective range, she asked. Depends on the day, he said. She wrote something down. Zethkai moved on without expression. That evening, Scylla fell into step beside him in the corridor without announcement. She walked 40 meters in silence. 11 years, she said. What about them? You said 11 years. In orientation. Yes. You don't look like 11 years. He thought about that. What does 11 years look like? She considered it seriously. Larger, she said. He almost smiled. I've been told, he said, and turned into the dormitory corridor. In his quarters, Zethkai sat at his desk with Eli's service file open on his screen. He had opened it for the first time that afternoon. He had closed it after the second page. He had reopened it an hour later. He was on page 4 now. The entry for a place called Call 7 occupied a page and a half. The phrase, sole remaining active combatant, appeared twice. The survivor count was 9. He closed the file. Sat in the dark for a while. He told himself he would finish it in the morning. He did not finish it in the morning. The simulation planet was a burned-out city, 6 square kilometers of collapsed structure, exposed conduit runs, and sight lines that gave nothing without being earned. Zethkai split the squad into 2 elements. He led the first, with Voss, Kerr, and 2 Vorkai troopers named Greth and Oren. The second element was under Arev, a Vorkai lieutenant with the precise confidence of someone who had never been wrong about anything and had not yet encountered the condition that would teach him otherwise. Eli and Scylla were assigned to Arev's element. The exercise objective, reach the central structure, neutralize targets, extract. 40-minute time limit. The squad record was 11 minutes, set by troopers who had punched through every wall between themselves and the objective without pausing to consider the strategic implications. Arev briefed the element with clipped, deliberate efficiency. Move fast. Suppress and advance. Do not stop. Eli looked at the map projection and said nothing. They entered the simulation. Arev moved fast. The Vorkai troopers moved fast. Scylla moved with a low, continuous precision that was different from speed in an interesting way. Eli moved wrong. That was the only word for it in Arev's assessment 11 minutes into the exercise, delivered in a sharp tone over the squad channel, cross. Keep pace. Eli was at a corner junction, pressed flat against the wall, not moving. He had been not moving for 90 seconds. Cross. Hold on, Eli said. The silence from Arev had a texture. Eli was watching the simulation's targeting geometry through the junction. He had read the coalition training manual on the transport. The targeting algorithms had a published rotation cycle. 4 seconds active, 3 seconds off. The system had started its off cycle 31 seconds ago. He moved through the junction. Nothing fired. He was in the next section before Arev processed the outcome. How did you know? Scylla said, on the private channel. The targeting system cycles. 4 on, 3 off. I counted back from when it last fired. A pause. While we were under fire. Yes. She made a short, precise sound that he filed away without a translation. The element finished the exercise at 38 minutes. Legal, but not impressive. Arev directed his dissatisfaction at the ceiling of the debrief room, which absorbed it without comment. Post-exercise metrics went up on the display. Eli's reaction time, 0.34 seconds. Every other trooper in the room was under 0.15. Voss was at 0.07. Sila, who had watched Eli for significant portions of the exercise, was at 0.11. The human hesitates, Zethkai said to the room. Not to Eli. About Eli. The room accepted this the way rooms accept statements from the largest and most decorated person in them. A rev picked it up from there. Your reaction time is double the squad average. In a live engagement, that differential is the difference between contact and injury. Between injury and something permanent. Eli was looking at the display. The number 0.34 sat there, factual and patient. My reaction time is slower, he said. Correct. Because I'm not reacting. A rev waited. I'm deciding, Eli said. The silence afterward had a quality Eli recognized across species and star systems, the silence of people who have heard a distinction and do not yet know what to do with it. In coalition combat doctrine, Zethkai said, with the careful tone of a man handling something he was not certain about, reaction time and decision time are the same metric. I know, Eli said. You disagree with the metric. I think reaction and decision produce different outcomes. And one of those outcomes is better, in ways the metric does not measure. Zethkai looked at him steadily. That is an opinion not supported by this data. Yes, sir, Eli said. Zethkai ended the debrief. In the corridor, Voss said it again. Hesitator this time, not soft meat. The comm implant delivered it with perfect fidelity. Eli heard it. He kept walking. A second training exercise 3 days later went the same way. Different terrain, an open field engagement simulation with minimal cover and maximum exposure. The kind of fight the coalition trained for because it happened on contested planetary surfaces with regularity. Eli finished last again. The metrics were the same. Reaction time the same. Movement patterns the same, low, indirect, pausing in places that looked wrong until they turned out not to be, which did not appear on the performance display as anything except a consistent pattern of being slow. A rev wrote a formal recommendation to Zethkai suggesting reconsideration of the human attachment's fitness for active deployment. Zethkai read it. He set it on his desk. He did not action it. Pryn came to him that evening with a supplemental file from the Coalition Records Division. She put it on his desk and stood there the way she had stood there 2 weeks ago, which meant she wanted a response and was prepared to wait for one. Where is this from? Zethkai said. Engagement records. His second posting. Before call, 7. He read it. He read the second page. He set it down and looked at the wall for a moment. The numbers from the first report, he said, are consistent with these. And the time frames. Also consistent. He was quiet for a moment. He has been here 11 weeks and his training metrics are the worst in the unit. Yes, Pryn said. But his field record. I know, she said. He looked at the file. He looked at a rev's recommendation sitting on the corner of his desk. He turned it over, face down. I want the rest of his file, he said. It takes a level 7 clearance request. Some sections are marked restricted. File the request. Pryn nodded and left. Zethkai sat at his desk for a long time after she left. He was not reading anything. He was thinking about a number on page 2 of a field report, and about the words, sole active combatant, and about an 11-year career filed under metrics that did not measure the thing he was starting to think was the only relevant thing. That night, Sila sat across from Eli in the canteen again. She had made a habit of it without announcement. You counted the targeting cycle, she said. In the first exercise. Yes. While the simulation was firing at you. While you were moving. While a rev was talking in your ear. Yes. You can keep a count in your head while everything else is happening. I can run 3 counts at the same time, he said. Separate tracks. She looked at him. How? Practice, he said. What kind of practice requires 3 simultaneous? 11 years, he said. She was quiet. He ate his food. The canteen was half empty, most of the squad in the simulation bay for an optional night run. Outside the base windows, the Kether 9 moon was dark all the way to the horizon. Soft meat, Sila said. He looked up. Voss calls you that. An hesitator. She said both words in Dreth dialect. They are not trying to be cruel. They genuinely believe it. I know, Eli said. Is it difficult? Hearing it. He thought about the question seriously. No, he said. Because you do not care what they think. He shook his head slowly. Because I have been called worse by people who had better reasons. She looked at him for a long time with her amber eyes, 4 full seconds, 5, the Quorith full attention expression that translated in a dozen different ways depending on context. In this context it felt, to Eli, like someone trying to read a map of a place they had not expected to visit. He finished his food, said good night, and walked back to his bunk. He took the photograph out and looked at it for a moment before putting it back in his pocket. 6 people. A ridge. Wind. He had been called things on that ridge too. He lay down and looked at the ceiling, and the waste cycle processor ran its 6-hour cycle and shook the wall, and somewhere in the base Sethkai was reading the 3rd page of a restricted file, and he was reading it slowly because you could not read it fast and still believe what it said. The patrol briefing for Thresh Moon, Operation Clearance, was standard. Suppress residual syndicate activity in the southeastern grid. 12-hour operation. Light contact expected. Eli had heard that last phrase before. 8 times, specifically. 7 of those 8 times had been wrong. He checked his kit with the same sequence he always used: rifle, sidearm, medical supplies, 3 ration packs, the photograph in his breast pocket, and said nothing in the briefing room except understood when Zethkai asked if there were questions. There were none. Which was either a good sign or the other kind. The squad deployed at dawn. Thresh Moon had no plants. It had a gray mineral surface and a sky that was the specific color of pewter left in a drawer, and it had ruins that had once been a syndicate forward installation before the Coalition's orbital campaign had expressed its opinion about that. The ruins were uneven and full of channels and angles, and the southeastern grid was 6 kilometers of that, and the intelligence report said residual syndicate activity was at most a dozen combatants. The intelligence report was wrong about the number. They were 40 meters into the ruins when the eastern ridge opened up. Not a dozen combatants. More. The first shot took out the forward scanner before anyone had processed that there was incoming fire. The second and third shots were bracketing rounds, not aimed at troopers, at the ground around the patrol's position. Whoever was on that ridge was not shooting to hit yet. They were shooting to hold. Contact right, Arev said, and the formation moved the way it was trained to move, Vorkai forward, Dreth flanking, everyone in their designated slot. Eli moved left. Not his designated slot. He moved left, behind a section of collapsed wall, pressed flat, and spent 3 seconds not shooting. Cross, Arev said. Same tone as the simulation. Eli was counting the fire rate from the ridge. Not individual shots, the intervals between coordinated volleys. There was a pattern. There was always a pattern. The syndicate trained their fire teams on coalition protocols, which the coalition published for interorganizational coordination, which meant their timing was in a document Eli had read on the transport 3 weeks ago. Second volley. Third. He located the coordination point on the 4th. The high piece of rubble on the ridge where a single figure was directing volleys with a signal relay. He fired once. The coordinated volleys stopped. The fire continued, but it was individual now. Individual fire was manageable. They have lost their coordinator, Eli said over the squad channel. Fire teams are operating independently. Push left from the second cover position and they will cross each other's lines. A pause. Then Zethkai, not Arev, confirm, cross. Confirm. Zethkai pushed left. It worked for 40 seconds. Then the ridge deployed a second element from the north, which was not in the intelligence report because the intelligence report had been wrong about the positioning and also, it turned out, about whether the syndicate unit carried heavy weapons. The heavy weapon hit the primary cover position. Zethkai went down. Not a small hit. A direct strike to the left side of his chest armor, which was rated for light to medium impact and which handled the heavy weapon the way a wall handles a vehicle driven into it. He was down. He was breathing. He was not getting up. A Rev looked at the collapsed position. He looked at fire coming from two directions. His training held him in the place that training holds you when the scenario has moved past the prepared response, not frozen, but waiting for the input that would unlock the next decision. The input was not coming. Eli was already moving. Not toward a Rev. Toward Zethkai. He pulled the commander back from the strike zone with one arm, behind the secondary cover, and then he was moving again, not running, never running. Running was panic and panic was the enemy of the counting, low, steady, precise. 3 parallel processes running simultaneously in his head while his nervous system did the thing it always did under fire after 11 years. It went quiet. He saw the field. 2 fire sources. The ridge element and the northern unit. Not coordinated now because the coordinator was gone. Independent fire teams optimizing for their own angles, which meant they had blind spots where their angles overlapped, and the blind spots moved on a rhythm, and the rhythm was countable. He counted. He moved through the blind spot. He was in the middle of the open field between both fire sources, which was the worst possible position by every conventional metric, and he stayed there for 11 seconds because 11 seconds was how long the blind spot lasted, and in 11 seconds he found the northern unit's power relay and destroyed it. Power relay was the feed for heavy weapons. No power. No more heavy weapons. Voss, he said over the channel. Northern unit is light now. Take Kerr and go at them from the east. They will fold. Voss did not question it. He went. Eli moved back for Sila, who had been holding the squad's southern exposure with the fixed, total attention of a Korath on a held position, and he brought her back to the medical point where Zethkai lay. 41 minutes from first contact. When it was over, Voss was on his feet with a burn across his left arm that he was pretending not to favor. Kerr had a crack in his chest armor. Greth and Oren were intact. A Rev was standing near the northeast ruins with the expression of a person recalibrating everything they had understood about something. Sila was kneeling next to Zethkai, who was conscious. Barely. His chest armor was partially collapsed on the left side, but the plate had absorbed enough to keep the vital systems working. He looked up at Eli. He said a word. The comm implant translated it after a 2-second processing delay, which meant it was a word the system had not encountered in common usage. The translation read, "The thing that should have died and did not." The implant's footnote said the term was used in Vorkai culture primarily in reference to geographical formations. Mountains, mostly. How bad? Eli asked Sila. He needs the medical bay. Then let's move. He took Zethkai's left side. Voss, without being asked, took the right. They moved. In the debrief room afterward, with Zethkai in the medical bay and a Rev seated at the table with the careful stillness of a man who has had a day that rearranged things, Eli gave his engagement report in the same flat, factual tone he gave everything. Targeting coordinator identified and neutralized. Fire pattern disrupted. Northern unit power relay destroyed. Squad extraction completed. PRYN was in the room. She was not supposed to be, she was intelligence, not field. She had come anyway and nobody had told her not to. She was looking at Eli with the expression she had been working on for 3 weeks. The expression of someone who has a question and cannot quite locate its shape yet. Voss said something after the debrief, in the corridor. Not in Dreth trade dialect this time. In standard coalition, which meant he intended it to be heard clearly. He went into the middle of the field, Voss said to Kerr. Between both fire elements. Kerr made a sound. And stayed there for 11 seconds. Another sound from Kerr. Different in register. And came back out, Voss said. A pause. And came back out, he said again, quietly, as if he was checking the math on it. The corridor was quiet. The nickname did not come. Eli was already at his bunk, taking the photograph out of his breast pocket, looking at it for a moment, putting it back. Stared at the ceiling. His heart rate was the same as it had been at breakfast. That was the second thing nobody catalogued. The medical bay on Kether 9 smelled like coalition-grade antiseptic and the particular kind of silence that settles in rooms where people are recovering from things they did not expect. Zethkai was in the primary trauma unit. His left rib structure, Vorkai had 7, arranged in an overlapping lattice, had taken a distributed fracture that the combat medics described as serious and the coalition medical system described as recoverable in 4 days. On day 2, Pryn came to Eli. She came to the canteen, where he was eating breakfast alone, and she sat across from him and put her datapad on the table face down, which meant she had not yet decided how to present what was on it. "I requested your full service record," she said. 2 weeks ago. "I know," he said. She looked up. "How did you know?" "Zethkai had the first 2 pages when I arrived." He closed it. Then he had more pages a week later. "You filed the access request." She looked at him for a moment. "The restricted sections came through this morning," she said. He ate his food. "I have been doing this for 14 years, she said. Reading records. Building profiles. The restricted sections usually explain the rest of a file. They give context." He waited. "Your restricted sections do not explain the rest of your file. They are the rest of your file. Each entry is harder to process than the one before it." He looked at his food. He picked up his ration cup. "Would you like to ask a question?" he said. "I would like to read you a section and have you confirm whether the record is accurate." He set the cup down. She turned the datapad over. "Call 7. She read the entry in a careful, even voice, the way you read something you are checking against the original because you are not certain the copy is correct. The engagement had lasted 11 hours. Eli's unit, 8 troopers plus himself, had been holding a ridge above a civilian extraction point. The unit had sustained critical injuries in the first 4 hours. 2 troopers were still able to fire. Then 1. Then the engagement record showed a period of 7 hours during which the sole active fire source was Sergeant Eli Cross, alone on the ridge, holding a position against a rotational attack force of significantly greater strength. She stopped. She looked at him. "That is accurate," he said. 7 hours, she said. "Give or take?" "Alone." "Yes. The extraction team took 4 hours to reach you." "I know. I was counting." She put the datapad down. Her face had the careful stillness of a person managing their reaction so it does not interfere with the information. 9 survivors, she said. "That is the number in the report." "Yes." "Not including yourself?" He did not answer. She looked at him steadily. "The report counts 9 surviving personnel from your unit. You are listed separately as the holding element. Not among the 9. He was looking at the far wall. The person who filed the report, he said, probably did not want to argue with the medical team about definitions. Pryn was quiet for a moment. "You were in the medical bay for 2.5 weeks after call 7, she said. "Yes." "Sergeant Cross." He looked at her. 9 people are alive because of what you did on that ridge, she said. He looked at the wall again. "The extraction team would have gotten there," he said. "I just made sure the math worked out long enough." She turned the datapad over and went to the next entry. Aerith Station. He remembered it the way you remember weather, the general shape, the sensory texture, the fact that it had been raining, and that rain on a station is a recycled water system malfunction rather than atmospheric, which made it exactly the kind of detail that did not matter and that he remembered anyway. Pryn read the entry. A syndicate boarding action on a coalition fuel depot. Eli had been the only non-station personnel on site at the time of the boarding. His response was described in the official record with a restraint of language that was doing significant work, phrases like, neutralized the primary threat vector, and secured the extraction corridor through direct engagement, that translated into specific numbers buried in the supporting data columns. She did not read those numbers aloud. She did not need to. They had been in Zethkai's partial report 2 weeks ago and she had been thinking about them since. Next entry, she said, mostly to herself. Corindal breach. A 6-day engagement in a cave system on a moon the coalition controlled on paper and the syndicate contested in practice. Eli had been part of a 12-person team sent to clear the breach. She stopped. How many came out? She said. 7 came out the way we went in, he said. 2 came out on the medical extraction transport. I counted them separately. She looked at him. 7 functional, he said. Plus 2 who needed the other transport. I count those differently. That is not how the coalition counts, she said. No. Which is why the official number says 9. Which is why, he said. She set the datapad down and folded her hands on the table, which was the Vorkai posture for arranging thoughts before saying something that needed to be said correctly. There is an entry here marked cross incident, she said. Level 9 classification. I have clearance for the summary only. He said nothing. The summary says you were the only coalition personnel in a contested grid for 72 hours. The syndicate casualty count from that grid during those 72 hours is, she stopped. She looked at the number. She looked at him. Is this accurate? Probably, he said. I did not keep count on that one. She looked back at the number. She set the datapad face down again. Sergeant Cross, she said. You have been at this base for 3 weeks. In that time, the standing assessment from training is that you are the slowest reacting trooper in the unit. That you hesitate. That you are a liability. He waited. How is that possible, she said. Not a question. A collision. He picked up his empty ration cup and looked at it. The training metrics measure response speed, he said. The time between stimulus and action. I score low on that because there is a step I add between the two. The decision. Yes. But in live engagement. In live engagement, the decision is the thing that keeps people alive. Not the reaction. The reaction gets you moving. The decision gets you moving in the right direction. He set the cup down. I spent a long time making the decision fast enough that it did not matter. The reaction was always what it is. She looked at him. 0.34 seconds, he said. It has been 0.34 since I was 22. It does not change. What changed was everything after it. She was quiet. The canteen was filling with the morning rotation, troopers coming off the overnight cycle. Voss came in with Kerr, both still in patrol gear, and they got their rations and sat by the window. Voss looked over at Eli's table once and looked away again. There was something in that look that had not been there 3 weeks ago. Something recalibrated. May I ask something personal? Pryn said. He looked at her. The photograph you carry. In your breast pocket. Who are they? He was quiet for a moment. People from Call 7, he said. She understood what that meant immediately. He could see it in the way she went very still. 6 of them, he said. Those 6 were from my unit. The other 3 got out on the advanced transport. I did not have a picture of the other 3. He paused. Owen took the photograph. He carried a camera everywhere. Coalition regulations limited personal items to 1 kilogram. The camera was 200 grams. He never left it behind. She waited. Owen was one of the 6, he said. She understood that too. I am sorry, she said. He picked up his empty cup. Set it down. He was not at Call 7, he said. He was at Meridian Point. 2 years later. Different engagement. He paused. Different math, he said. Pryn said nothing. She had run out of the right words, which was unusual for her, and she handled it with the dignity of someone who had the honesty to recognize when words were not the correct tool. Across the base, in the medical bay, Zethkai was propped on the trauma unit bed with Eli's service file on a handheld display. He had started it at midnight. It was now morning. He had finished it at 4 and then read it again from the start. He was reading it a 3rd time, not because he doubted it, but because the first 2 readings had been about absorbing information and the 3rd was about understanding what the information meant about every conclusion he had reached in the past 3 weeks. Voss came in at mid-morning. He looked at the display in Zethkai's hand. The record. Voss said. The record, Zethkai said. Voss came and stood at the foot of the bed. He read what was on the display. He was quiet for a while. Call 7, he said. And 12 others, Zethkai said. Voss was very quiet. He scored 0.34 on reaction time, he said. In every exercise. Yes. Every single one. Yes. Voss looked at the wall. He looked at the floor. He looked at the display. He went into the middle of the field on Thresh, he said. Between both fire elements. Zethkai set the display down. He was counting, he said. Voss looked at him. He runs a targeting cycle in his head. He had the blind spot interval counted and used it. 11 seconds was exactly how long it was open. Zethkai looked at the ceiling. I should have seen that before, Thresh. You were occupied with being struck by a heavy weapon at the time. Before that. He looked at Voss. He told us directly. In the debrief after the first exercise. He said he was deciding, not reacting. I told him it was not supported by the data. Voss did not say anything. The data, Zethkai said, was 3 weeks of training exercises. And the other data. Zethkai picked up the display and handed it over. He let him read. The bay was quiet except for monitoring equipment and the distant sound of the base running its morning cycle. Voss stood there and read and did not move, and turned the pages one at a time, and said nothing. He set the display down carefully on the bed. The way you set down something whose weight you have only just understood. He let us call him that, Voss said. The whole time. Yes. Soft meat. Hesitator. All of it. Yes. They were both quiet. Outside the window, Eli was crossing the exercise yard toward the gear bay. Alone. Rifle on his shoulder. Steady pace, the same pace he always moved, like someone who already knows exactly where he is going and has decided there is no reason to rush the arrival. Zethkai watched him through the window. Pull a Rev's recommendation, he said. Already done, Pryn said, from the doorway, where she had apparently been standing for some portion of the conversation. Zethkai looked at her. I pulled it this morning, she said. Before I read him his record. The new deployment briefing was 7 days after Thresh. Zethkai was out of the medical bay in 4 days, which was the predicted timeline for Vorkai physiology. He came back to the unit on day 5 with a sealed joint in his neck where the plasma burn had scarred purple, which he wore with the same expression he wore his campaign medals, not pride exactly, but acknowledgement that the event had occurred and he was still present. He ran the briefing himself. The target was a syndicate staging point on a planetary body called Aaron 4. Dense atmosphere. Low light conditions. Terrain. The topographic report described as severely obstructed, which Eli, reading the same report the previous night, translated to himself as a long and interesting problem. Standard mission parameters. 3 objectives. Extract within 6 hours. Zethkai moved through the tactical overlay. He covered the objectives, entry points, extraction corridors, and secondary fallback positions. He asked for questions. Eli raised his hand. The room looked at him. It was the same room, the same faces, but the geometry of the attention had shifted in a way that was not announced and was therefore more real. The southeast approach looks faster, Eli said. But the topography puts the primary element at an elevation disadvantage for the first 400 meters. If there is anything positioned on the 440-meter ridge, that element is exposed the entire approach. He paused. The northern approach adds 11 minutes to transit time. But the 440 ridge is below you for the full approach. No exposure from that angle. Zethkai looked at the overlay. He looked at the elevation data. He moved the primary approach marker to the northern line. Anything else, he said. The second objective's exit route, Eli said. There is a choke point at marker 6. If something goes wrong inside the structure, the choke point becomes a problem before it becomes an exit. Worth identifying a secondary before entry. Zethkai moved a secondary marker. Good, he said. The briefing ended. In the gear bay, Eli was running his pre-mission check when Scylla took the station beside him. She checked her own kit in the Korath field order, which prioritized sensory equipment over weapons and which she had once explained to Eli was because knowing exactly where everything is already puts you 3 decisions ahead. He had thought about that for a week. Aaron 4 has a dense atmosphere, he said. Visibility will run lower than the equipment ratings account for. Coalition optics are calibrated for standard atmosphere combat. You can adjust them by hand. It takes about 20 minutes if you know the sequence. She looked at him. You have done this before. Several times. Show me. He showed her the adjustment sequence. She watched with the focused total attention she gave to things she decided were worth understanding, and she completed the adjustment in 12 minutes, which was faster than Eli's 20. He told her so. Quarith visual processing, she said. Is that an advantage here? In low light, yes. In standard conditions the calibration takes longer because there is more information to filter. He filed that. Voss came to the station while Eli was still there. He picked up the manual adjustment tool and looked at it. The optic sequence, he said. For the dense atmosphere. Eli showed him. Then he showed Kerr. Then Greth came and asked, then Oren. The two new Dreth replacement troopers, Han and Drev, had been watching from a distance and they came closer and asked too. He showed all of them. Arev was the last to approach. He waited until the others had moved away and then stood at Eli's station and looked at the tool on the counter. You did not say anything, he said. When I called you a training liability and recommended your removal. Eli set the tool back in its case. You were not wrong based on what you had, he said. The metric I score worst on is a real metric. Arev was quiet for a moment. It is not the only one. No. Another pause. I was wrong about the others. The training data looked the way it looked. You read it correctly. Eli picked up his kit. I do not hold it against you. He walked to the deployment line. They shipped out at 0400. Aaron 4's atmosphere was exactly what the report said, dense, particulate, the kind of air that settled against the visor and turned long-distance assessment from a science into a practiced estimation. The surface was old volcanic geological formation, all ridges and drops and surfaces that punished movement that was not deliberate. The northern approach added 11 minutes. It was worth all of them. The 440-meter ridge, when they crossed below it, was occupied. A syndicate observation post. 2 personnel. Elevated position exactly where Eli had marked it in the briefing. They passed beneath it through the dead angle of its scanning arc, which Eli had identified from the topographic data, and the post never detected them. Arev, walking behind Eli on the approach, said nothing. His silence had a different quality than it had 3 weeks ago. The first objective was a communications relay inside a low-reinforced structure. Eli entered first, moved through it the way he always moved through enclosed spaces, low, measured, using the layout the way you use a problem you have already solved before the room knew you were solving it, and the relay was neutralized in 4 minutes. On the way out, Eli paused at the secondary exit he had identified in the briefing. Here, he told Voss. If the primary exit closes for any reason, this is a 14-second route to the extraction corridor. Voss looked at it. Mapped it. Nodded. It did not close. But Voss knew where it was. The second objective was a data cache in a deeper structure, further into the syndicate position. The northern approach had put them on the right side of the ridge and the right side of the observation post scanning field, and they reached the second objective 12 minutes inside the tactical window with no contact made. Inside the structure, Eli heard a sound before he had a term for it. A low mechanical cycling. Not equipment, not atmosphere processing. The interval between cycles was 1.8 seconds, which was a loading and tracking sequence. A sensor-triggered weapon system in standby mode. He stopped. Sila stopped. The squad stopped. He listened through 2 more cycles. Automated defense unit, he said, quietly. Sensor trigger. The tracking field is probably the corridor. Stay here. He followed the conduit run along the base of the wall, structures run power along the shortest path between source and load, the same principle on every planet he had ever been on, found the secondary power relay, and pulled it. The cycling stopped. He stood up. Clear. The data cache took 2 minutes to extract. They were moving toward the third objective 5 minutes ahead of schedule. The third objective was the most exposed, an equipment depot in an open surface installation, no ceiling cover, multiple approach angles. The topographic report had flagged it as high risk. It was third because you clear the enclosed positions before you take the exposed one. Zethkai took point on the third objective. He looked at Eli first. A question without words. Eli looked at the installation. He looked at the approach angles. He pointed to the dead angle entry on the western side, where two structural sections overlapped and created a shadow in the installation's scanning coverage. Zethkai looked at it. He took the western side. The squad went through in single file at a measured pace that Eli had described, before they moved, in exactly these words, not fast. Steady. Fast makes noise. Steady keeps the count. Nobody asked what count. By now, they knew there was one running. They knew it was running in Eli's head along with 2 or 3 others, all simultaneously, all precise. They knew that when he used it, it would be correct. They went through. The depot was cleared the same way the other 2 objectives had been cleared, measured, deliberate, each piece of the approach a decision made before the previous one was finished, the whole sequence the product of something the training metrics had no column for. 3 objectives. 0 contact. Extraction at the 4-hour and 40-minute mark. In the extraction bay, the squad was quiet in the way squads are quiet after operations that went the way they were supposed to. Not the relief quiet of a close thing. The settled quiet of a thing that was planned and worked. Voss sat across from Eli in the transport and looked at him for a while. The automated unit in the structure, he said. The one you heard. Sensor triggered. The reload cycle was 1.8 seconds. You heard that? Yes. While we were moving. Yes. Voss was quiet for a moment. How many separate counts were you running today? 4, Eli said. Sometimes 5 if the environment requires it. Voss looked at Kerr. Kerr looked at the floor with the expression of a person who has just recalibrated something significant and is still processing what the new number means. Zethkai was in the forward section of the transport, eyes closed, not sleeping. Vorkai in recovery did not sleep on extraction transports, resting in the way he rested, breathing even, his healed side settled against the seat. He opened his eyes. He looked at the door between transport sections. He thought about a morning 3 weeks ago, standing at a processing console, reading a manifest that said, unaugmented, in the specific tone of a word that means already decided. He thought about the equation he had run and about the way equations fail when you feed them the right numbers and the wrong variables simultaneously. He thought about the entry for call 7. 7 hours. He closed his eyes. In the main bay, Eli took the photograph from his breast pocket. He looked at it for a moment. Owen, second from the left. Lena at the far end. The ridge behind them, the wind that did not photograph. 6 people who had been alive and were alive still, in the past where photographs live. He put it back. Looked at the transport ceiling. Scylla sat down beside him, which she did without asking now, which he had stopped noticing because it had become the position she occupied and he had adjusted to it the way you adjust to a piece of equipment you carry long enough, not consciously, just incorporated. Good operation, she said. Clean one, he said. Because of the prep. He thought about it. Because everyone did their job right. You adjusted the optics for 6 troopers this morning. Someone needed to. You caught the elevation issue in the briefing when everyone else had approved the faster route. The data was in the topographic report. Anyone could have flagged it. She gave him the 4-second stare. They did not, she said. He said nothing. You are not going to accept credit for any of this, she said. Credit is for the report. The report will reflect what happened. And call 7, she said. Whose report was that? The transport hummed around them. A frequency Eli had memorized because knowing which sounds were normal meant you heard the ones that were not. The report was accurate, he said. That is not what I asked. He was quiet. Owen took the photograph before the engagement, he said. In the staging area. He always had the camera. He said he took pictures because it was easy to forget what things looked like before they went wrong. He paused. He was smarter than me in the ways that matter during peacetime. Sila was quiet. The ridge was 11 hours, he said. The math was simple. If nobody held the position, the extraction corridor collapsed and the 9 people below it did not get out. Holding it until the team arrived was the decision that made the math work. 9 people who are alive, she said. Yes. And you were shot 3 times. He looked at her. Pryn read me the medical report from the file, she said. He looked at the ceiling. 2 were clean through, he said. The 3rd needed attention. You did not mention that part, she said. When you explained the math. It was not relevant to the math. She made the short, precise sound. He had a translation for it now, assembled context by context over 3 weeks. It meant, I do not know what to do with you and I am not sure I need to figure it out. Lena, he said. The one at the end of the photograph. She was at meridian point 2. Same engagement as Owen. She made it out. Sila waited. She is a battalion instructor now. Teaches tactics in the 4th sector. He paused. She sent me a message when the joint program transfer came through. She said to stop getting shot. Good advice. She has always been better at the giving advice part. Owen too. They both had an ease with other people that he stopped. Started again, differently. I am better with the math. Sila looked at him with her amber eyes, calm and steady. You are better with people than you think you are, she said. He had no answer for that. He thought about it the rest of the flight and still had no answer when the transport landed at Kether 9 at 0812, smooth and on schedule. The squad filed out in the order they sat, which was not the order they had entered, because the positions people occupied now, who sat where, who grouped near whom, the quiet geometry of the bay, had rearranged itself over 3 weeks in one operation and a service record that meant something different than a training metric, and everyone present knew it, and nobody announced it, and that was how the most permanent changes work. At the bottom of the landing ramp, Zethkai stopped. He turned and looked at Eli, who was 1 step behind him on the ramp. He did not say anything. He looked at him for a moment with the measured, serious attention that was his natural expression, not a performance of wait, just wait, the settled kind that comes from seeing a great many things clearly over a long time. He nodded. Eli nodded back. Zethkai walked into the base. Eli stood at the bottom of the ramp for a moment. The Kether 9 moon was in its daytime cycle. The sky was the color of something he did not have a word for, a color that existed in this part of space and not in Kentucky, and that he had looked at almost every morning since he arrived and had decided, somewhere in the 2nd week, that it did not need a word. Some things were complete without one. He walked in. His bunk was still next to the waste cycle processor, which ran every 6 hours with a sound like gravel in a metal drum and which he had slept through every night since the day he arrived. He put his kit down. Sat on the edge of the mattress. Took the photograph from his breast pocket and looked at it one more time. Owen, 2nd from left. Lena at the end. A ridge in the background and the wind that moved through it, invisible in the image the way the most important things are invisible in images, present only in the squinting of 6 faces that knew the wind was there. The math on that ridge had been correct. The math at Aerith Station had been correct. The math on Thresh Moon had been correct. The math today had been correct. The math would keep being correct for as long as he could run it, and he intended to run it for a good while yet. He put the photograph back in his pocket. Lay down. Looked at the ceiling. Well, all right then.